Uh, Good evening. Yeah, we welcome you to today's session in microeconomics. We are still continuing looking at the process of demand and supply. To be so specific, we want to study the equilibrium point. How do you determine the equilibrium point? That is to say, the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity given the supply and demand equations. So how do you play with the two equations? So as for today, I have one question here. Yeah, I just have a question here. This question came in the year. It's one of the questions that you had in your assignment, and you are given some equations just to demand and supply equation, and then you needed to really play with them so that you can determine the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. And so the two equations that you were given are as follows. So I will focus on number 2. Okay, let me just pick the question. I need to pick the question. Where is the question itself? Where is the question itself? Okay. Okay. Just being given this equation, this test that is there, that was there at some point. So you are given the two equations, and the equations that you are given, there is the demand equation that was given as the quantity demanded QD was equal to 1,000 minus 250 P. Then you also had the quantity supply. This is the supply equation. It was giving you 150 P. Then what you were asked of doing is to find the equilibrium quantity and the equilibrium price. This is very necessary, and you need this. So at equilibrium point, we all know that at equilibrium point, quantity demanded, quantity at equilibrium point, quantity demanded is always equal to quantity supplied, to quantity supplied. This is at equilibrium point. So how do we determine the equilibrium quantity, equilibrium price? We simply equate the two equations that we have been given, and we will equate the two equations. That is to say, quantity demanded, QD, is equal to QS, quantity supplied. So you say 1,000 minus 250 P should be equal to 150 P. So from here, what you do, you basically solve for P. You just solve for the value of P. So you will say 1,000, then making the other angle cross to the other side of the equation, making the other expression, or making P the subject of the formula, you have this equal to 150 P plus 250 P. Okay, 250 P. And so you have 1,000, that should be equal to, and the 150 plus 250, it gives us 400 P, right? 400 P. We divide through by 400. We will divide through by 400 as we try to solve for P. We divide through by 400, and what do we have? So we will say, we are going to say 1,000 divided by 400 and that gives us 2.5 as the value of P. So therefore, our P, let me just erase here, our P, our equilibrium price shall be given as 2.5. 2.5 is our equilibrium price. Okay, this is our equilibrium price. Therefore, our equilibrium price is equal to, our P is equal to 2.5. What about our equilibrium quantity? So basically what we do with the equilibrium quantity, you can substitute in either the quantity demanded equation or quantity supplied equation. So any of the two, they will basically give you the same answer. Replacing into the supply equation, this is what you're going to have. If you are to replace into the supply equation, our supply equation is given as QS, that is to say quantity supplied, is given as 150 P. Therefore, where there is P, we will replace by putting 2.5. And what we're going to have is 2.5 times 150. This gives us 375 as the equilibrium quantity. So this is our equilibrium quantity, okay, or Q star if you want. Q star or equilibrium quantity is given as 375. You just replace that equilibrium price that you found into into any of the two equations, okay? You can still find the same answer even if you are to replace into the quantity demanded equation. We can even give this a try. We know that our equilibrium price is 2.5, and our quantity demanded equation QD is given as 1,000 minus 250 P. So we have 1,000 minus 250 multiplied by 2.5, because that's our equilibrium price, okay, multiplied by 2.5. So all we are going to have is 1,000 like 250 times 2.5, 625, 1,000 minus 625 gives us quantity, the Q star or equilibrium quantity as 375. 375. We are done with question number A. Then the question number B says, graphically illustrate your answer, okay? Graphically illustrate your answer. So you need to graphically illustrate this solution. And from our own basics, we know that equilibrium point is depicted like this, okay? Supply and demand equation like this. At this point where these two meet, that is our equilibrium point. But how do we graphically depict this or show this? So what you have to do, you have to graph these two equations, okay? So number one, we're going to begin with the demand equation, okay? The demand equation. The demand equation will give us this line for the demand curve. It will give us the demand curve. But when you are finding this demand curve, you need to know the intercepts, the number which should be here, the quantity, of course, on the horizontal axis here, the last quantity, and the last price that is here. Pay attention to this one. This is very crucial, and you need it. When you're drawing a demand curve like this, there is a last number here and the last number here, the last price. How do you get to know these numbers now? You already know the equilibrium price, that it is 2.5 here and 375 in the middle here, where the supply cross. But what are these numbers? These two numbers, how do you get to have them? So what you do is easy. If you want to know the price, the maximum price, you will set quantity equal to 0 in this equation. So if we set quantity equal to 0. So quantity demanded will be 0 is equal to 1,000 minus 250 P. We solve for P. Make P the subject of the formula. We have 250 P is equal to a what? 1,000, and we divide through by 250 by 250, and that should give us that our P is 4, right? Our P is basically 4 because 1,000 divided by 250 is basically 4. So this is the maximum price, like the price that you have on the intercept, like the highest price that you have on the intercept. So you have known that when you're drawing your demand curve, the last number here or the last number here on price on top is basically 4. But how do you get to know the quantity, the last number that is here? This is what you do. It's easy. What you do from here, you just set price now equal to 0. If you're looking for quantity, set price equal to 0. If you're looking for price, set quantity equal to 0 of the same equation. So what are we going to do? You're using the same equation. We're going to use the same equation, but now we're going to set price equal to 0, leaving quantity the way how it is. So you will say quantity demanded is equal to 1,000 minus 250. It is 1,000 minus 250. Let's say you have 1,000 minus 250 P, and we have depicted that P is always equal to what? To 0. Now we have set P equal to 0. So we have 1,000 minus 250 multiplied by nu, 0. So when you do multiplication here, you shall have 0, and you have 1,000 here, and 1,000 minus nu, 0, you have 1,000, right? You will have 1,000. You will have 1,000 as the maximum number. So that is what we are going to basically have here. So once you have 1,000, it means the last number on a demand curve. Now we know that the last number here is 4 on top. Here now is a what? It's 1,000, but in between you have 375, which is the equilibrium quantity, and here you have 2.5, which is our equilibrium price. So our demand curve shall be like that. But what about the supply curve? This one you don't even need to struggle to always start from 0. So you know that equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity, they will meet somewhere here. You just draw a straight line, they meet somewhere here. Then the supply will always be cutting here. So by so doing, it's easy. You would have done the needed. So you just plot the demand curve most of the time. So once you do that, supply curve will be very straightforward for you. And so let's depict that now graphically. How do you do and show these solutions graphically? Observe how your graph will be now. Your graph will be like this, right? You'll have 1,000 here. This is quantity, of course. This is your quantity. This is your quantity. On horizontal axis, we always have quantity. We always have quantity. And then on top, we have price. And we have the maximum price. Let me just use the blue marker for you to be able to see. You have 4 as the maximum price. You have 2.5 as the equilibrium price. And you have 375 like that. Our demand curve is from here up to here, right? Our demand curve is from here up to here. This is our demand curve. And our equilibrium point is that one, okay? Like this. So since they meet here, this is our supply curve, like our supply curve. Our supply curve is coming here, cutting on x-axis. By so doing, you would have presented your solution graphically. You have depicted this graphically. This is very necessary. You need it, okay? I'll run you through quickly. I said, number one, when you want to find the equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity, set the two equations, solve for P. Once you find that P, substitute that P into either of the equations, they will give you the same answer to give you the quantity, equilibrium quantity. Once you find the equilibrium quantity now, to graph this, start with the demand curve. You want to know the last price here, the last price, set quantity equal to 0, then solve for P. You will have your P in that from this equation. If you want quantity, which is the last quantity here, just set P equal to 0. Then it will give you the last quantity here. And then you just join these 2 points. That will be your demand curve. Then you already know that equilibrium price is always in the middle. That's it's not always in the middle, but this is our equilibrium price that joins the quantity supplied and quantity demanded. So they meet here. You just draw a straight line. Where they meet now, that's where your supply curve will do what? Will pass, and you just draw your supply curve. Now observe, this is so crucial now. We are saying that from here, can you be able to calculate consumer surplus and the producer surplus? Let me start with the consumer surplus. Pay attention, please. Consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is basically the area of this triangle, depicted as the area of this triangle. This triangle, the triangle which is above, it is the area that is above this equilibrium price, and it is below this demand curve. Okay, it is bounded by the vertical axis. This area here, this is the area that we are talking about. And once you look at this area, you know that this is a right-angled triangle, right? It's a right-angled triangle. Therefore, you know how we find the area of a triangle. The area of a triangle shall always be given as half base times what? Times the height, h, right? Half base times the height, h. And what is our base? Our base is always this one. This is our base, okay? Which is from 0 here up to 375. That will be our base. Then our height, it is this area here, okay? This area here. From this point up to the maximum price here. So our height shall be 4 minus 2.5. 4 minus 2.5, it should be able to give us 1.5. 4 minus 2.5, it gives us 1.5. And 3. So what we're going to have is our base is 375. So say 375 times 1.5, our height, divide that by 2, right? We're just substituting into that same particular formula. So you're saying 375 times 1.5, okay, times 1.5. This gives us 562, right? It gives us 562.5. Divide this by 2. If we divided this by 2, we divide this by 2, we have 281.25. 281 is basically 281. Okay, it is 281. So it will give us 281. So this will be 281.25 units. Okay, or unit squared. It's an area. 881.25 unit squared. So this is basically the area that is represented by this triangle. It is called the consumer surplus. That is called the consumer surplus. Now, what is consumer surplus? Consumer surplus is the difference, okay, Consumer surplus is always the difference between how much the consumers are willing to spend on a commodity and what they actually pay. Okay, how much are you willing as consumers to pay for that commodity and how much you pay? That is called consumer surplus. So, for example, let me give an example, a practical example. If you go to shop, you are willing to spend a 5,000 to get maybe a laptop at 5,000. Then you go to the shop, you find that it is actually 3,000. Okay. Then your consumer surplus will be 5,000 minus what? 3,000, which gives us a 2,000. So this 2,000 will be your consumer surplus. That's your surplus as a consumer. So that's what we mean by consumer surplus. Yeah, but you can calculate it from this graph. It is represented by the area, this area, which is just the area of a triangle. The base, I said it is always this one. All right, what about the producer surplus now? What about the producer surplus? The producer surplus. The producer surplus is always now depicted by this area that is bound by the vertical axis, and it is above the supply curve. This area, it is above the supply curve, but it is below the what? The equilibrium price. This area now, which is down. This is your consumer, this is your producer surplus. Producer surplus. It's your producer surplus. Your producer surplus. Then this one is your consumer surplus. You will see that even this one is a triangle, right? This will be a triangle. Let me use a broom for you to see. This is a right angled triangle. It's basically a right angled triangle. Once you observe it, you'll find that this is a right angled triangle. So how do you find this area now? You see that the base is still this same one. It's still the area of the right angled triangle. So the formula stands as now half base times what? Times the height. Times the height. What is our base? Our base is always this one, the base of the triangle. So the base of the triangle is still 360 what? 375, which is the area from here up to here. Okay, that is our what? Our base of this triangle. This is space. What about our height? Our height is the area now from this is 0 to 2.5. This is our height. This is our height. This triangle has just been inverted. If you can see it, it has just been inverted. So from 0 up to 2.5. So 2.5 shall be our what? Our height. We divide through by 2. When you do 375, if you're to do 375 multiplied by 2.5, it gives us 937, 937.5. Divide that by 2. Okay, we divide that by 2. Find the area. Find that is it gives us 468. Our area is given as 468. It shall be 468.75 units squared. All right, 0.75 unit squared. So it shall be 0.75 unit squared. 0.75. It shall be 468.75 units squared, like that. So this will be basically your what? Your producer surplus, which is the area that is marked by this place, this region. Okay. This is your producer surplus. What is producer surplus now? Producer surplus is the difference between how much the producers are willing to supply the commodity and at what exactly they supply. Okay, the producers might be willing to supply a commodity. Let's say the producers are willing to supply the commodity now at let's say they're just willing to supply the commodity at 500 kwacha. Then they happen to supply the commodity at 700 kwacha. So this difference is what is called the producer surplus, meaning they have gotten some surplus as the producers, okay? They have gotten more, okay? So this is what is just being talked about, and this is how you basically solve this equation, this question. So do I have any questions? Just a very quick recap. We have shown you how to find the equilibrium quantity and the equilibrium price. We have shown you how to depict this graphically, and we have shown you how to find the consumer surplus and the producer surplus. So do we have any questions? If we don't have any questions, then it is well and good. It's well and good. We can just end our class here today.